Okay. Here we go. So, all right, welcome everyone. Here comes the file. Nope, it's taking me longer than I intended to find it, so bear with me. Here it comes. All right, so everybody who's watching the recording gets to awkwardly sit here and wait for me to find my file too. Okay, so today we're going to be continuing the conversation about extensions and alterations. And I've made some progress since our last conversation. There's still probably more to be done. And of course, I need everyone's input on a few items. And let's hop right into it as normal. Please stop me when you have questions or objections, or if you know something about SACS policies that would be relevant, let us know that too. Okay, share screen. Here we go. All right, so you're looking at my screen here, but obviously what you're seeing is the SACS sub-change policy. And there's a good reason for that, because I was referring to it. All right, so let me go back to where we started. All right, so as with before, let me get this a little bigger for y'all. We've already talked about some of this in blue. Everything in blue is new. And I've tried to highlight a few things in yellow or make comments or both to show you all what I've been up to since our last meeting. Okay, so minor changes to the definitions. So I added curriculum largely because I found myself referring to curriculum and I figured it would be helpful to have it there. If you will, I tried to be as broad as possible, but my main thinking is that I wanted to make sure to distinguish between curriculum and delivery modality or method of delivery, because those are treated differently by SACS, and AIC also wants to treat them differently. Anybody got objections?
I agree.
Thank you, Liz.
So you're welcome.
Yes. All right, so based on our discussion last time, I've also updated this down below on method of delivery, which I was calling delivery modality. But based on what you all shared about SACS COC sub-change around program change, method of delivery, I have kind of amalgamated that with the definition we've got in our distance education policy and added the distinct types, including competency-based education. We already knew about distance education, and then face-to-face instruction. So the distance education definition is the one that we had in the distance education policy that you all, or colleagues who were at the open forum on distance education, brought forward. So there shouldn't be any conflict between those. All right. Do you all have questions, thoughts, objections? Nope. Okay. All right, I added a little bit in nomenclature. This is one of the things that can be somewhat confusing for us in reviewing new programs, is how you all refer to your program internally sometimes is a combination of nomenclature and program title. And sometimes this gets into our program system. And so we're just trying to be clear that nomenclature is the award name. And then the title is going to be the field of study. And together, nomenclature in field of study creates the full degree name. And changes to nomenclature are sometimes treated differently from changes to program titles, so we had to distinguish between those. This particular format does result in things that are a little bit funny sounding sometimes, like Master of Science in Nursing, MSN in Nursing, where the nomenclature has the fields, but then we also need the program title. All right, now I added a new definition, this time from SACS, program length, because they do treat program length separately, where there are some additional sub-change requirements. And so I wanted to make sure we could discuss those in our policies as well. All right. Okay, we did have a pretty robust discussion last time on what to call the level 1A certificate. Ultimately, going back over what we talked about, I landed on mini certificate. The thinking was, I think somebody pointed it out in the notes, that if we call it micro certificate, there could potentially be confusion introduced with micro credential. And mini certificate is just, you know, blah enough that no one else is going to call something that, and therefore it should be, you know, more or less safe to use. The abbreviation I came up with was mini, but it could be MNC, like STC, or just MC, but I think mini is probably a little more clear. So what do y'all think? Do we agree with the way this is shaping up, or do we have more input on what we should call this one? No, y'all are satisfied? I guess I'll take the silence because I know y'all on the call would hop in if there was something wrong.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I thought I had unmuted. I said I like that, Robin.
Thank you, Natalie, because I don't think the community colleges allow certificates that are smaller than 9 hours. Is that correct?
Right, that is correct.
So it won't, you know, I'm not expecting to see a whole glut of these.
Right,
There are just a handful that have come through in the inventory that we would need to be able to, you know, reclassify.
okay.
Now, I know somebody wrote in the chat, definition for micro credential. And I know we talked about it last time, but just for the record, we tried, I think it was about 1.5 years ago now, to put out some definition for micro credential that would be for credit. And what we found was that there was enough confusion in the market around what is a micro credential. Is it credit? Is it non-credit? Is it graduate? Is it undergraduate? How related does it have to be to employment? That it was kind of like grasping at the wind. And so we have decided not to make a definition of micro credential. That being said, shouldn't stop institutions from making their own coherent definition of micro credential. And for this, I'll specifically single out UNA if anybody's on here from them. I know they brought forward their own definition of micro credential, and they internally classify certain 4-credit certificates as micro credentials, and AIC captures that as part of the program title. We had previously thought that we might be able to capture that as part of the nomenclature, again, to get to like how we're going to call this, that there might be a kind of short-term certificate that is a micro credential. But like I said, the amount of confusion and sort of policing that might potentially result from that seemed daunting and undesirable. Frankly, many of the stakeholders on this call were right out in front telling us that that would not be a good direction to go. Okay. All right, program title. briefly just tidied this up and call it programs field of study alongside nomenclature, so it parallels the definition up above. All right, last definition that we added was programs that lead to professional educator certification. And this is a special class of programs. Those of you who deal with your College of Education and its CAPE accreditation know that, well, somebody put it to me once, nothing is more regulated than teacher ed programs other than pesticides, which I thought was a little bit telling, but perhaps true. There are a lot of regulations from the State Board of Education around professional educator certification programs, and so we wanted to be able to have rules that address those, basically to create flexibility for those programs so that they can move forward through the other more stringent processes that are run through the Alabama State Department of Education. All right, we've already seen this one. Where, you know, reasonable is something that existed in the previous policy. So again, anything in black was language that was existing. And then we are trying to get rid of some of this outdated language. And units are not treated here because we've already put them in a policy that went through and has already been approved. That includes instructional role. Okay, so that's, I think we pretty much got to there last time. Are y'all with me so far? Yep, okay.
Yep, we're good.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so now we're on to the actual changes. So just like before, remember we've seen this before. So we got our reasonable ones. So we're now about to go into changes to degrees over here. And we had talked about doing substantive with approval, substantive notification, and non-substantive. And so that is how this section is structured. So we've got reasonable extensions, and the previous policy up here somewhere said are defined as substantive or non-substantive, and we're adding a third category, right? And you know, we want to make sure that if you all aren't sure which one it is, that you know you can contact us. I do imagine there is going to be guidance that will come out once we get this policy through. That will be, you know, maybe what I would love to see, frankly, is taking this SACS sub-change policy and having an annotation next to the item to say, this is what it requires from AIC. So I know you all use this every day to refer to in your sub-change. And that way you don't have to collate multiple things. We'll just put it right next to each other.
I second that.
Yay. Hopefully the others agree that that would be a good idea. That way it's all clear. I remember one former colleague who went away to another state said to me, oh, I really want to create a crosswalk between them. And it was very complicated because the existing policy is a bit higgledy-piggledy. So this is my attempt to fulfill that aspiration. But of course, we got to get the policy through before we can provide such a guidance document. Okay, so yes, Ginger, thank you. All right, so substantive requiring approval. So all this in yellow is language I wanted to talk to you all about. It's all new because it's blue text. So certain extensions must be approved. And the rationale that we give, that's the part that I wanted to describe, is because the change is determined to be similar in scope to new program of instruction, which, as you all know, has already got a description. We've already been over it and it's been finally approved. But unlike new programs of instruction, here's the difference. These modifications will not have post-implementation monitoring. So the new program of instruction, you know, adds a new entry to the program inventory, and it takes that 7-year monitoring period. But for this, and we've already started doing these in a roundabout way, called a substantive modification. They go up to the commission for approval, but they don't then adopt that post-implementation monitoring. All right, so to make this more clear, the kinds of changes we're describing are consolidating programs. So that means you've got 2 or more programs in your inventory, and one of those programs will be deleted, or potentially both will be deleted, and a new program at a third SIP would be created. But it is based on existing programs that have already passed their post-implementation review. And there are certain conditions for that, and you can see a couple of these conditions in black were from the original policy. And those include that the existing program and the consolidated program, so that's the resulting program, must have at least 2/3 of their courses in common. And then the consolidated program is configured to have options, and the options must have the 50% option, which we had talked about briefly, but is also down below here. So does this make sense to y'all? Do we, I don't know that I feel one way or the other about keeping these. Part of me thinks if there were 2 programs that existed that shared 2/3 of their courses in common, why weren't they a program to begin with? But you know, any thoughts or desire to remove or consolidate any of this language? Bliss, you came off mute. so
No.
you.
Like I'm not, I think I like it separated personally, just because I know that there's an instance where we're looking at this information for 2 programs. This is very helpful to have those parameters defined, but that's just my initial thought, so.
Yeah, and like I said, this is the existing policy. I guess one thing I could imagine is that there may be a desire to consolidate programs that don't have 2/3 of their courses in common, that instead have, let's say, 50% of their courses in common. I'm thinking, processed one a while back from, call out the University of Alabama in Huntsville. I believe it was a space science program that was merging with the atmospheric science program. And the 2 programs both were in physical sciences and shared coursework, but I don't know that it was a full 2/3 of the courses. But it made sense for the department to consolidate its program into one entry with 2 options, and then the options had 50% of the coursework. So, you know, unless, in fact, while I was putting this together, I thought, oh, do we really want to keep the 2/3? Maybe we just make it 50%, and then it's just consistent with options and programs 50%. So I don't know if y'all have a reaction to that.
This is Rena. Can you hear me, Robin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that was my question is, if you have 50% seems like a sufficient threshold to me. Because I mean, you want to know that these things are happening. So if you put the minimum too high, you won't capture all of them.
Or you'll prevent some of them from occurring when a consolidation would be in the best interest of the institution and the programs.
Yeah, right. You want to provide everybody flexibility.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was coming from, because if we, you know, if 50% is the option with the other options, then, you know, why couldn't 2 programs being consolidated share 50? Like, just make it 50 across the board.
I support changing that, yes.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll add a change to 50% for Consistency. All right. And that way, this second bullet point here is about the relationship of the existing program with the consolidated program. And the third bullet point is about the consolidated program, the options within it related to each other. But they have the same threshold, so it doesn't require us to do like gyrations of curriculum mapping. Okay. All right, so that's the change around consolidating programs. All right, separating a program. And this is what has happened more frequently. We've been treating this as a substantive modification. And this would involve splitting a program into distinct degree programs. And that, like you see here, is usually a new program proposal, but we have been allowing these to go forward under the following circumstances, where the proposed modification doesn't require additional resources, and where the two programs that would be split can each show that they would meet post-implementation conditions for graduates. So we wouldn't want separating a program to be a pathway to skirting post-implementation conditions for one of the options. So we want to be able to check that at the time of the split, but then after that, both programs would then just be implemented because they already had been seen to be sustainable and viable. All right, do y'all have any, like I said, this is basically the practice we've been doing kind of in the background for several of the institutions over the past 2 or 3 years, called, some of you know, the quote unquote skinny proposal, where you, in order to do this, have to give us certain information that's kind of like a proposal, but no business plan because there's not additional resources. And then we need to see program performance rather than projected performance. All right. So the third kind of substantive change, and this again is intended to mirror what SACS is doing, would be curricular changes over 50%. And in this case, we would add this provision that the program needs to exceed its minimum viability in order to pursue the curricular change using the substantive modification. Because remember, the modifications under this section don't get new post-implementation conditions. So we would want to know that everything is kosher, so to speak. But that isn't to say that the institution couldn't pursue a new program proposal instead. So that, you know, both of those options would be available to an institution. All right, this is from the original policy. If less than 1/3 of the major, and by major they mean the program core, is in common with the existing program, the change will automatically be considered new. So there has to be, so basically we're talking about curriculum changes over 50%, but less than 66% is kind of what that would do to it. Now, not knowing exactly how frequently a change of this magnitude happens, I don't feel beholden either way to keeping this or not keeping this. I'm hoping you all can shed some light on it. Does it happen where you're proposing to SACS to change, say, 75% of a program?
Others may can speak, but I don't know if it's maybe, I haven't seen one here that's significant. Most of the time it's right above that 50%, to 60%, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I guess where I'm going with this is if it is, if it can happen, that's a program legitimately would change 75% of its curriculum. And adding this clause or keeping it from the original policy would stop that generally recognized thing from happening, then we wouldn't want to add it. But given that this, was there, I try to preserve as much of what's from the original policy as I can. So I'd be inclined to keep it if that situation doesn't really occur. And again, an institution could bring forward a new program rather than pursuing it this way. That certainly doesn't stop them. Yeah, well,
Isn't it the SACS COC? I mean, if it's greater than 50%, you have to submit it's a new program, correct? So regardless, is that right? Someone else might.
I believe that's correct, yes.
I'm just wondering if that's even needed. Like if it's, as far as SACS is concerned, 51% it's a new program or 50%. Whether that's 75% or 60%. Does that make sense?
right. And the reason AIC would perhaps not want to call it a new program, although we could, is that a new program would then kick off that post-implementation monitoring. So this provides institutions a path to change the curriculum in important ways, perhaps in line with specialized accreditation or some other thing, but not have to go back through the post-implementation process.
I see.
But by all means, we could just take this out and say that it's a new program and go back through that process.
Robin, have you seen any programs lately with this using under this particular existing rule, part of the rule?
I think it is potentially more common to happen at, say, the master's level. Because when you're in master's level, you're talking about 30 hours the minimum length, and so 50% or a little over 50, if you're changing out coursework for 15 hours or 16 hours, suddenly you cross this threshold. And that can happen, especially if a program's specialized accreditor moves the goalpost, so to speak. Sometimes the accreditor says, oh, this program must now move from 30 credit hours to 40 credit hours, and then you change a couple of courses and suddenly you're over the threshold. So it's not something we see very often, but I can imagine it happening in that circumstance.
Okay, thank you.
Robin, when you're talking about curricular changes, in SACS, in the substantive change, it's talking more about new content. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes. Or content that changes. And for our purposes, we're thinking about coursework. So if you are changing out the learning outcomes in your courses, but not the course title or the course requirements, I don't know that we would need to know that. I guess that gets up to the definition of curriculum that I put up here. Let me just look back. Body of coursework, assessments, or other requirements to complete. So if it's not changing the courses that you need to progress, then, well, I don't know. I guess this might be a place where we differ from SACS. What are you thinking, Ginger?
Well, it seems like we don't tend to do this often. We just get questioned about it a lot because there is a tendency to revise the curriculum based on the current research or changes, especially in some of your technical programs. However, over time, curriculum changes, and it should change based on the assessment of student learning, as you know, we're asked to do. So I guess that's kind of the question I get more often. I want to make some changes to the curriculum, and at what point can I do that without having to report it, whether it's to AIC or to SACS? So and I think for clarity's sake, and SACS does talk about content because you're making a significant departure from your program.
Right. So I would like to avoid a situation where AIC is asking for something that SACS is not asking for.
Right. I agree.
So, because that will just be loads of confusion.
I agree too. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Ginger. I have a meeting about that very question right after this meeting. So yeah, absolutely.
So, and normally that determination about what rises to that level of change, if I, as I understand it, happens from you all, and the tax liaison level would make that determination, yes, or yes, no, it doesn't cross that threshold. And I think that's the intention behind the language that was added here about institutions' responsibilities for determining that, submitting paperwork, and then down here, there's another one about changes to curriculum between 25 and 49%. That, this, we would leave it to y'all to, we can be more clear about that to make the determination. But does that give us enough wiggle room, or is it too, because like I said, I want to avoid a situation where we're asking for more than SACS does.
Yeah, I like that with SACS, we can make that determination, because we have to, are they leaving, for lack of a better word, the discipline in terms of if they're adding courses that are, and some of the things that we use are, you're adding courses that you're going to have to hire new faculty with from a new discipline to teach. So we have some guidelines in SACS that allows us to make that determination so that we're not reporting every change, because I don't want to see it either.
So if I were to add this language, institutions are responsible for determining the percentage change. And then for us submitting documentation, we just want to know what you decided. Does that cover you?
Yeah, because that's pretty much what we do now, or I do. If I am asked about this, we go through, we look at it, I make a determination, I send them an email or a formal letter that says, in my judgment, this is or is not a substantive change, and we move on from there. And then if it's not a substantive change, I have a record of it in case anybody ever asks. I don't send it to SACS, I just keep it in case the question comes up during a compliance visit or some other reporting.
Right, so what we're looking at now, we kind of skipped ahead to the related item under substantive requiring notification, which again,
Right.
that other category that was intended to mirror some of what SACS refers to. So for this, we picked thresholds that were aligned with the way that SACS operates between 25 and 49%. And that would just require a notification to AIC, and we would put it under program changes, modification to curriculum, so forth, but we would leave it to y'all to determine. And then back up where we were talking about before, curricular changes over 50%. Now, you all have said that SACS considers this a new program, but like I said, the potential advantage of including this in AICS policy is that you wouldn't have to go through the whole new program proposal thing. And that instead you'd get to do this skinny proposal where you don't have to do the post-implementation requirements or the resource business plan. And we can add that, determining the percentage change and submitting documentation. All right, if y'all are satisfied with where we've kind of landed on this, then we'll keep on keeping on. Okay, so I added something new that was not in the old policy, largely because SACS adds it, and it seems like this would be something the state would be very interested in, where the program length changes in such a way that there is a change in students' time to degree. Particularly, we would be interested if the time to degree becomes extended, because obviously we want students to have shorter path to completion. And my understanding was that SACS has this as something they also approve. Go ahead, Rena, what you got?
Yeah, sometimes this goes back to your comments about the Alabama State Department of Education. I know the last time we had a significant change in alternative requirements, those degrees increased. There was quite a robust change. So do we need to make a note here about those types of changes as well?
Well, since you brought it up, I'll skip ahead. So remember I had said we were gonna have the potential for flexibility around teacher prep programs. Okay, so just so you know, substantive notification, non-substantive, and then a new section, changes to programs that lead to professional educator certification. These, are basically, they're not substantive, they're not requiring notification, they're not non-substantive, they're their own thing is what I'm trying to get at here. Where we would want the institution to consult with ALSDE. And then once it's clear what the change is requested and how soon it needs to go in and all the other things, institutions may request that the commission waive the requirements. So we just kind of want communication. Because it's all so specific. And that's one example that we may potentially say, okay, well, everybody's changing their all-day programs all at once. So we'll just let that pass for everybody.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And there was a carve out in the old policy. I, got the red strike through to cross it out because it's a very specific situation about adding teacher certification programs and when it's not a new degree program. And I think we need a little broader flexibility around any kinds of changes that relate to educator certification. Okay, but that wouldn't apply to other programs that are not educator certification programs. All right, okay, I'm trying to get my bearings here. So approval, we talked about consolidation and separating, curricular changes, length. Okay, modifications to doctoral programs. I wanted to talk about this, but this is more or less the existing policy where award nomenclature and IPEDS level, because there are those 3 levels for doctorate, the 17, 18, 19. If an institution wants to change its level or assign one of its doctoral degrees to a different IPEDS level, then we would want that to also be under this doctoral program modification. And the idea behind this, I believe, in the existing policy is to protect the integrity of the Doctor of Philosophy so that institutions, and I don't know if this happened in the past, but I think the idea was, no institution should be kind of getting a practice-focused doctorate and then just doing a notification change to turn that into a research-focused doctorate. There should be an approval process. This term, research-focused doctorate, was introduced in the policy on instructional role. And I can put that reference in here, but I wanted to present this to you all, see if this was if this made sense before I went and gave it a full treatment. No, nobody thinks this is insane? Okay, well, if you decide that there's an objection, Rena, I saw you come off, I know you're the.
No, yeah, no, I agree. I think this is good, considering, what, certainly what you brought forth to Alabama Council of Graduate Deans and our discussions about level changes. I think this is great.
Okay, I want to be clear and consistent.
And I do like the idea of of referencing, putting the reference there for research-focused doctorate just for information.
So it's clear what we're talking about. Because again,
Right.
it may not be an issue if, I'm trying to think of a practice-focused doctorate that might go from like,
Somebody could have an EDD and they want to move to the PhD.
yeah, so that one definitely we would want to review. I'm just trying to think of one that's like, say, I don't know, a doctor of social work that we wanted to become a doctor of science in social work, like still within the practice doctorate realm. We might let that go as a notification only, but definitely would need larger scrutiny if it were going to change into a research doctorate. Okay. All right, folks, so let's go into the notification. So now we're kind of stepping down. This is describing the information items. So when I email you all, everybody about, here are the information items we have coming up for this meeting. And these are, the deadline is later. It's mostly a review. AIC's role is largely collating a list and maintaining our program inventory. This is what would govern those information items. So regarding options, so you can see this is black text. Some of it is, but it's consolidated from the existing policy. And I heard last time that there was a desire to be a little more specific around options, keeping the original text around the program core and 50% of the program, which we saw up above. And so this is basically when you're adding an option, we want to take a look at it. The idea here is, protecting the integrity of the degree program, that you're not.
So would this be like a new track, Robin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we had a definition of option up above that said, is synonymous with tracks, concentrations, specializations. Should probably add emphasis because some of y'all call it emphasis. But any sub components that are under the degree program, not minors.
So would this be, is this a notification then, or would it be just a notification? Okay.
Yep. And I know
okay.
we're kind of
Oh, there, it's up there. Sorry.
right there. So these are notification, and this language in black is part of the original policy, right? Changes will be recognized by information item. Sometimes we'll have questions for you. But yes, so basically I'm imagining continuing the organizational structure of the information items around addition,
Got it.
options, inventory updates, and so forth. Okay, so inventory updates would include these changes, which again are in black, so the original policy had it. Award nomenclature at the same IPEDS level. And I'm proposing striking provided the new nomenclature replaces the current designation because there are instances where especially at the master's level, the nomenclature for the non-thesis track may be different from the nomenclature for the thesis track, but they're both the same program. And we wanted to allow for that to happen. So we would consider it a change rather than a replacement. And of course, there would be a rationale, but we just want to allow for that to happen. Changes to titles or zip codes. All right, back to what we discussed before, changes to the curriculum between 25 and 49. And then except for the carve out to program length. So again, this should mirror what you all are doing with SACS. All right, changes to delivery modality and in keeping with AIC's existing policy on distance education, this is only when the delivery modality is 100% of a given modality. So if you're got a face-to-face and you're adding 100% distance education track, we need to know about that. If you've got a distance education track and you want to add 100% competency-based track, then we would want to know about that. But otherwise, we would consider changes to be to existing courses, and we don't need to get into the weeds in the way I think you all do have to report that to SACS, but I don't see any reason we would need to know about it. Anybody objecting? We want to tell you, because you know the other question is if you do have to notify SACS and AIC doesn't deal with it, then I don't know if you all need some kind of confirmation from us that this is not something we deal with. But anyway, if you don't, less paperwork for us. All right, so non-substantive, and there are probably some additional things that I would want to add under here because I was kind of getting to the end of what we could manage. So let me pause on the dual degree and go to changes to curriculum under 25%. So AIC would not want to know about that. And that would include program length. Changes to options. So this parallels what we talked about last time. So AIC does not aspire to become the options police. We had tried to keep track of the options in our system, and it is very difficult to do because they change. So we would want to only review the option for notification at the time that it's added. And then once it changes, once it's already added, it's existing, and changes to its title or the coursework in the option, we wouldn't want to know about that. There are two exceptions. One is if the change tips over that 25% of the curriculum, then it goes up to the previous notification item. And the other is if you want to assign a CIP code to an option and make its own entry in the program inventory, that is considered a substantive change that, is separating a program. And we would need to review that as such. Most changes to delivery modality. All right, are y'all good with me so far?
Sounds good.
All right, so up here, dual degree. So this is the language from 1988. And I think it probably needs a little bit of attention. So what, I know you all have to notify SACS if you're doing joint degree programs, and of course we can be more specific about what AIC might require for that, but if it's actually a dual program, either between institutions or within institution where there are two existing programs that are kind of a double major or being more efficiently sequenced, We've often gotten questions, do we need to let y'all know about that? And the answer is no, if both of the pieces are already on the books. And I would like to more accurately describe that here, and I don't know that dual degree is the clearest way to do that anymore. So I'm thinking also of the like 4+1 configuration where an undergraduate student may be accepted into graduate coursework and complete their master's in an accelerated way. So as long as both pieces are on the books, we don't need to know about it. Okay, so my question is, does calling that a dual degree make sense to you?
Robin, perhaps it can be called a dual degree and then a definition be put in that definition area.
Okay, yeah. Unless there's a better name. What if we called it a double degree? Or accelerated degree?
I don't think that would capture what it is, though.
No, and I think a lot of our institutions do use this term dual degree.
Okay. Ginger, I saw you come off mute. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I was gonna protest double degree. That's the term dual degree, double degrees, I always have to go back and look at our definitions because they're all very different. But, like a double degree is actually two different degrees, like a BS and a BA at UA. So we'd have to go back and probably change some degree titles here.
And we don't want to tip off, extra bureaucratic work. So if we call it a dual degree, keep that name, then I can certainly come up with a better way to describe it. Looking at SACs and trying to see what would be a clear way to do that. But like I said, this is most common within a single institution where there is a sequencing of two programs. Maybe a Master of Public Administration and a Master of Business Administration is an example. And
I also see second degree. I did a little quick search. Second degree is also language I see people are using.
okay. All right, I'll put check second degree. And I think the definition I would kind of come back to is where I've counseled people who have called me about this before is if the two programs exist and you're just more efficiently sequencing courses or double counting coursework within the boundaries of what SACS allows, then we would not need to know about it. So do y'all kind of agree with that conceptually? Yeah.
Robin, would you say that again, please?
Right, and I'll write this before we move
okay.
forward. But the concept is going to be if the two component pieces are already in AICS inventory and you are proposing a track or cohort of students for whom the degree requirements are made more efficient, primarily by double counting courses toward both degrees, then we trust that you will do that in a way that's within SACS policies, and we would not need to know about it.
Okay. Yeah, SACS uses the term joint degree, joint awards.
Joint awards, okay.
Yes.
Because I know joint degrees between institutions refers to something else, right?
No, joint is between institutions.
So what about within a single institution? That's primarily where I see this. like your accelerated bachelor, master.
Oh, that's a totally different one.
Right, so that's
Yeah.
what would we call that class of programs within your institution? So I'll,
Yeah, dual degree.
okay. All right, so if nobody's saying, oh, a dual degree is something totally different, then maybe we'll just stick with this.
So these are, these, what you're talking about, and specifically in this one that's highlighted, is within institutions, not between institutions.
Well, the original policy language, which is the black, did talk about between institutions, but
Right, okay,
really what I am looking to address is within an institution, where there are two separate degrees that would be awarded at the end. And we can deal with between institutions, perhaps somewhere else. Okay. All right,
yeah,
so
I like, because we're working on an agreement now with an out-of-state institution. Would that be something AIC would want to know about?
I don't think so. So that would, and I think Saks does this. Well,
But we do have to take that to
they
SAC.
have the program changes and then there are the site changes, and I think that probably needs a little more thought about whether we want to have a put that in this section, because it hadn't been in this section before. I think it's under some other section that we haven't looked at in a while. All right, folks. Well, I see we're getting close to 1 p.m. So obviously we are still trucking along here. And I think it might be reasonable to expect that we should have at least one more open forum to look at the feedback from this and make sure everything kind of lands the way we want it to land before we proceed to the December commission meeting. Do y'all feel good about having one more? I think 2 weeks from now would be November the 2nd. So we'll kind of just keep plugging. And of course, if you can come, great. If you can't come, we'll post it online on the webinar page. And we'll plan to pick up where we left off on November 2nd. Okay. Now that I can see your lovely faces, if anybody wants to hang out and offer any additional feedback, please do feel free. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the 2nd.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Enjoy your work, Robin.